They've gone all in, close down Strait of Hormuz right away, hitting ships, all these bases. We're seeing videos of them even striking hotels that are the floors that are housing U.S. military officials. Israel is just getting pounded. I mean, to me, it looks like Iran is doing a lot more damage to the United States and Israel than the U.S. and Israel is doing to Iran. I don't know if that's, we just because we're not seeing enough footage coming out of Iran, but it seems like what Iran did is, like I saw a slow moving drone take out a multi-billion dollar radar installation in Bahrain, or maybe it was the UAE. This has been happening all over. It seems like Iran has rapidly degraded the US's military capability, and probably Israel as well. I'm not sure of the extent of the damage there, what they've been doing to all these military targets there. So it just, you're saying that maybe in the beginning they could hit really hard, maybe destroy, degrade Iran's capability. It seems like it's the other way around. Is that the way that you're assessing it?
Well,
That
if you're talking about military capabilities, well, certainly Iran is degrading, for example, the naval facilities, air bases. They hit, it was, I think, a $1 billion radar. It was part of an early warning system. I think it was in Qatar. But this is a very, important installation. It's one of only 6 in the world. It's part of a global early warning system. And they did severe damage to it.
Yeah, there's Chinese satellite imagery of it.
Right.
It's just completely gone. I mean, a huge hole in it, I would say, but it's
right. And clearly I lost count of how many strikes there were on that naval port, which I think is the largest naval port it may be the largest naval port outside of the U.S., largest U.S. naval base in Bahrain. And actually, as it was being struck, you could hear people cheering because Bahrain is 80% Shia. They're ruled over by Sunni monarchs. And so this is making them very, very nervous. Okay, but go back to your larger question about degrading military capabilities. Clearly, the Iranians are having some success, but I think they're doing more economic damage, again, just by effectively shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and, hitting these gas facilities, shutting down airports. I mean, Dubai is a huge international airport. And Dubai is completely dependent on, tourism and whatever. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not, millions. I don't know how. A lot of people go to Dubai. I don't know why, but they do. Anyway, they're stuck there. They're stuck there. And I think the damage is going to be permanent. There's a sense that this was just a safe playground, and I think that maybe has been lost forever. So all these Persian Gulf states are suffering severe economic damage, and, Europe in particular, the rest of the world. It does put pressure on the U.S. because in spite of the things that various European leaders say, it's clear that the U.S. and Israel started this. This did not have to happen. So at some point, especially if they fail, and I think, again, they're very likely to fail. It's not impossible. I think we have to admit that. We don't know exactly what's happening.
Well, yeah, you might get struck by lightning. I understand.
Okay.
Right.
But, they are very likely to fail. And then, this goes on, and the economic pain is only going to get worse and worse and worse. At some point, in spite of all these stupid statements that the European political leaders have made, blaming Iran, I think they all know who started this, and there's finger pointing is going to begin. I've noticed that it's actually begun already, within the U.S., and this is in real contrast to past wars. For example, I read it was actually a video that was published by the New York Times, David Sanger, he is one of their most fervent anti-Iran hawks. And he has been for decades, going back to, the first Iraq war, or, the Iraq war of 2003. So he's always gung-ho for war. But he essentially was saying, well, let's be honest, there was no reason for this war to start. It was not a war of necessity. this was a war of choice. We can't talk about preemptive strikes or anything. And he didn't quite use the words, but he was basically saying, admitting this was a war of aggression, and we were not justified in doing this. Hey, this is Mr. Anti-Iran war hawk. Yeah. And then John Bolton has come out against it. Again, this guy, he's never seen a war that he didn't like. This is significant. It's significant. The Democrats, again, they were just pathetic. They let this happen. They cheered.
State of the Union address.
Trump at a State of Union address. It was the one thing they cheered. It was like the stupidest comment that he made when he just talked about comments on Iran. So, of course, they're Democrats. They stand up and they cheer it. And but so they did really nothing to resist it. If anything, they cheered him on, quite literally. But if it goes south, and it appears to be doing that right now, I think they will be quick to hop on, the anti-war bandwagon when they realize how unpopular this is. They'll be opportunistic in this way. So Trump, there's going to be this, there's going to be domestic pressure, real domestic pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the Pentagon's throwing Trump under the bus. From what I hear, Trump was saying, Iran was getting ready to attack us. That's why we had to strike first. And the Pentagon's come out and said, we have no information about that. There was no sign that Iran was going to attack us. No. In fact, from my understanding, Iran, the day before the attack carried out, agreed to no stockpiling of uranium at all. So that This was something that wasn't even the JCPOA, and then Trump could walk away with a huge victory saying there's no stockpiling at all. Prior than the old JCPOA, they could have up to 300 kilograms. Here they have nothing. The ability to make a nuclear weapon is impossible. And so it shows just how willing Iran was going to play ball, and that this was still just all a ruse. And as soon as Trump could have waved it around as a victory, said, look, I did it. JCPOA was garbage. This is way better. Now the Iranians get no enriched uranium at all. No stockpiling of it at all. 100% verification. Huge win. He could have called it and said, I did it. I got a deal that's so much stronger than what Obama had. But then it shows you that this was never the plan. As soon as Iran was willing, we will make these concessions. And I was getting frustrated with Iran because they were playing ball. Because I was like, don't do this. Tell Israel they can't have a nuclear power plant, go after their illegal nuclear program. Instead, they make these concessions, and then immediately we attack them. So, one of the first things we attack is in elementary school, and then we kill an 86-year-old religious leader, Khamenei, who seems to be, just a humble, good guy. Seems, I don't want to harp on it too much, but I just feel like everything we did was just calculated to make the world hate the United States and Israel as much as possible. It's like, I don't understand why. It's like, why was this the plan? Iran, it was in negotiations. They agreed to a deal. You bomb an elementary school. Then you assassinate the religious leader of this country. And now this war is kicked off, and everybody is now having to pick a side, everybody around the world. Before, it was only people like us that were aware that this conflict was bubbling up and like, oh, this is, we got to pay attention to this. Well, now everybody's paying attention to it. And when they have to pick a side, who are you going to pick a side? You were talking about just contrasting a leader like Trump with Khamenei, and we just see everything that Israel has done in Gaza the past couple of years. And now they're saying like, oh, we're under attack, we're playing the victim. It's over. The world is rejecting the U.S. and Israel, because this was just so blatant, so unnecessary, so obviously you are the aggressor. In no way can we frame this as somehow the United States is in its right and it's justified in carrying out these actions. There was even just the audacity. I wish I uploaded this clip. Many of you probably have already seen it. This news clip, it was on NBC, where the reporter, the anchor asked the Arachi, the foreign minister Arachi, saying like, under what right, what justification are you able to give for striking U.S. bases? And Arachi's like, you attacked us. You understand that this simple fact, you attacked us from these bases. We are defending ourselves. Don't you understand? I think the world will understand this, right? And the world does understand this. But just the the insanity to even ask that question with a straight face. How could you? How could you do this? It's like, we've been telling you that we will fight back if you hit us. And then we do it. And now all of a sudden, from my understanding, is that within 24 hours, Trump was reaching out to the Iranians through the Italians, asking for a ceasefire, and Iran said, screw you. Their negotiations are over. This is done. This is going the distance. And they, like I said, all their chips are on the table, and the U.S. is not ready for this at all. The world is, the Middle East is, and I think another thing is, I think once we started hitting all these bases, there was all this Hosberg going out, like, look at Iran attacking all of these countries, and now all these countries are going to come together and attack Iran to fight back. Saudi Arabia is going to declare war against Iran, all this. Well, what I saw this morning was just it was on Al Jazeera. There's some spokespeople from different Arab countries, and they're talking about how they are just upset. They're furious because the security of their countries have not been prioritized at all. It is clear that the U.S. only cares about Israel and nothing, like, look what's happening in Bahrain, like you were saying. It's just getting pummeled. And it's like, okay, yeah, this arrangement will work out. The idea of these military contracts with the United States and holding these bases was supposed to be about security, but it's clear that it's the opposite. It makes you a liability, it makes you a target, and the U.S. doesn't give a damn about you. They're not going to protect you. It's all going to Israel and their bases. They don't give a shit about the other countries,
Right.
Pardon my language.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, no, that's true, actually. Right. I guess the thinking would be, it's like, yeah, we welcome the Americans, so we allow them to have this enormous base in our country. Surely that will contribute to our own security. But it's quite the reverse, and we're seeing it now. And we saw it earlier, of course, in the case of Qatar. Now, yeah, there is this interesting question is, like, to what extent the Persian Gulf states were actually in cahoots with this attack. There was a report that came out in the New York Times. I think I just saw it yesterday. That no, not the New York Times. I'm sorry, the Washington Post. That in fact, the MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in spite of, publicly saying that he did not want this to happen, he was pushing the Americans and the Israelis to refrain from attacking, and that he would deny airspace. He was, in fact, urging them. He was there. He had placed several phone calls to Trump, urging him to go ahead with this attack. That's what this says. Now, I don't know, that may not be true. That might be misinformation, but it is possibly true. And if it's true, this is the game that all of these people have been playing. They're pretending to stand up to Israel, to stand for the Palestinians, but that has not been true. That has not been true for many, many decades. They have, behind the scenes, been cooperating with Israel and with the U.S. But that's something they don't want. They don't want that known, because they understand that that's unpopular among their own people. These corrupt rulers, it's all to their benefit, and they play this game. But they do have to consider, even though they don't have to face any elections. There is always a chance of a revolution or riots or whatever, and so they pretend. But if this is true, that's going to be very embarrassing if this news gets out, and it's obviously out, but if it's going to be believed by people on the street. And now, Saudi Arabia, and I think at least some of the other Gulf states, have threatened to actually join in the war against Iran. But if they do that, then they're making it quite open. Yeah, they're fighting on the side of Israel and America, against a Muslim state. And that's just not going to be popular. That's not going to be popular at all. So first of all, I don't think they're going to do it. It could be suicidal for them if they do it. And then they really can't contribute much. They're very, very weak militarily themselves. They really just depend on the U.S. and Israel. And obviously, the U.S. and Israel really is not concerned about them, other than using their bases. Now, one thing I just want to mention very quickly, you mentioned that story about Trump reaching out and asking for a ceasefire through the Italians. I tried to find confirmation of that, and I couldn't. It seems to be something that's out on social media. Now, it might be true, but let's just say we don't know. It's not confirmed.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for adding that. Um, yeah. I mean, just this another thing that I think is just a sign of how badly this is going for Trump is, they named this Operation Epic Fury, which is the most
Yeah,
third grade level
right.
naming I can think
Yeah.
of.
Well, they,
But
right.
the
Eh,
moniker that is sticking though with everybody is Epstein Fury, and I think that is very apt, and it just shows that like this is where the American people are at, where the world is at, and it's like, are you on the side of this evil pedophile Epstein class, or are you on the side of righteousness? Like this is like I said before, men around the world, the people join the military often because they have this idea of fighting for good, for righteousness, and that is their job to go out and conquer evil. Now, politicians take advantage of that by distorting the truth and trying to make somebody evil. But it's becoming clearer and clearer to people now that there is really evil, that we don't have as nuanced of a situation that occurs in most conflicts. Like, it's difficult, it's complicated. Here, it does just to seem to be a black and white situation. So, like I said, that's a rallying cry around the world. Like, okay, well, we know what the evil is. We see the evil. It's there. It's the one that's massacring children. It's the ones that are protecting themselves from their heinous, debaucherous, pedophile acts. These are the evil people, and they are instigating these wars. They are just slaughtering people. So it just becomes clear to the world. And so the it just yeah it's I'm hate that this war is happening, but it just feels like it has to happen because and Iran is on the right side fighting the evil. And
mhm.
it's not that I'm saying that American soldiers are evil. Like I said, most of them were due probably because they thought they were going to do a good thing and fight evil. But I think they're realizing it, and I think so many people in the United States are realizing that as well. That we're the bad guys. You know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, clearly we're the aggressors. I mean, you just talk about it. It's just a completely unprovoked, unnecessary war to the extent that even David Sanger is admitting that. Um, we are the aggressors, but I'll say, the whole world is waking up to that fact. Well, not the political class in the West, because again, it's
Yeah.
just like the statements that came out from people, Merits is particularly bad, but just in general, the European leaders, it's just um, they could not find it in themselves to condemn the aggression or to identify the Americans and Israelis as aggressors. If they're not aggressors, what does aggression mean? This was just a textbook definition of an completely unprovoked, unnecessary war of aggression. This is what it is. But they could not get themselves to admit, to acknowledge that, and instead they are blaming the Iranians for fighting back. That's what we got. We got a slightly better statement from the Spanish president, but it was just sort of condemning both sides. But still, that's rather pathetic. And, again, what are the Iranians supposed to do? Are they just supposed to kind of roll over and let themselves be killed? What are they supposed to do? But he, at least he did criticize, I think in really much too weak terms, but he did criticize Israel and the U.S. And I think there may have been one other country where the leader did that. Maybe it's Norway, but in general, but that's those were kind of mealy-mouthed exceptions. In general, they all are lining up with Israel and the U.S. But as I pointed out earlier, this is going to as time goes by and they start to suffer the consequences, and I think they already are. Gas prices have gone up 50% just practically overnight, and oil prices are going to keep on rising. And again, they are like the most vulnerable part of the world to this because of their own stupidity. There are going to be real consequences, and I just hope against hope that the Europeans wake up and just say these bombs have got to go. And we'll see, but we're not there yet. They're still in charge, and they're still
Yeah.
denying the reality.
Well, they make a lot of noise, but they don't have any real power. They don't have economic power. They don't have military power. They're just annoying the European leaders more than anything. But the countries that do have some real power, for example, Beijing, China, I follow the Chinese social media pretty closely, and they're ablaze about this. The whole world is, obviously. This is just a huge event. But the consensus is clear from the Chinese is that you cannot trust the Americans for anything.
Right.
Diplomacy with the United States is only a ruse. We've seen it again and again. We saw it with Iran twice in the middle of negotiations with negotiations scheduled. Both times. It's just doing it once was just insane enough. And doing it again. And we've seen it as well with the Minsk Accords, Minsk 1, Minsk 2, Istanbul. It's all a ruse. So the message from Beijing is clear. They condemn this unequivocally and are saying that the United States cannot be trusted, and we have entered a new world where the only language that is being spoken is power. And that's what matters. That's the only way to engage with the United States at this stage. It is crystal clear to them and the rest of the world. The Europeans, as these little vassals, they'll just say whatever they want to say. Kaya Kallas is like, yay, now the Iranian people can pave a brighter future. It's okay, right? Nobody cares what she says. Their words don't have any effect. What matters are these other countries, and they are ready, and they're gonna dump the United States. Like, this is the outcome of this war. The U.S. has to admit that it's no longer the global hegemon, and it has to withdraw and accept its place in the multipolar world, or that this is going to go nuclear. I don't think there's a third option.